All right, let's see. Not sure if this is working. I hope it's working. All right, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. How do I mute this? All right. Okay, so yeah, so today's the last day we meet for lecture. It's been quite a bit of material and homeworks and assignments, and we had to do quite a bit of stuff. So today we are going to review for the final exam. Let's see if I can share my screen. My YouTube video is repeating after me. It's echoing. I don't know how to shut it quiet, make it quiet. Is there a mute? There's share, CC, capture and quality report, playback speed. Well, I guess not too bad. Do you hear an echo at all?
No.
Anybody hear an echo?
No.
No? Okay, good. All right, good. That's okay. That's all that matters. Okay, so let's go back.
I heard my echo, but I couldn't hear yours.
Okay, great. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Start broadcast.
I heard my echo, but I couldn't hear yours.
Okay, great. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Start broadcast. Okay.
I heard my echo, but I couldn't hear yours.
Screen broadcast. Okay, great. I'm going to share my screen. You're sharing my screen. Okay, can everybody see
the like latency?
The exam here? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Screen broadcast. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, now it's like
You're sharing my
there is
screen.
some echo,
Okay,
and it's kind of like latency.
The exam here? Yeah, there's that's what I hear. I hear somewhat of a small late echo coming from YouTube streaming.
There is some echo, and it's kind of like latency.
I don't think I hear it anymore. Yeah, there's that's what I hear. I hear some. Do you hear it? A small late echo coming from YouTube streaming.
I don't know what is the current one, because like there is like voices all over the place, like when in the phone, like lines or like calls get mixed or something like that.
Really? Okay. All right. I'm just gonna stop the Google stream.
There is like voices all
And
over
this
the
will be
place,
recorded
like
on
in the phone,
Canvas.
like lines or
Right.
like
So
calls
let's
mixed
see.
or
Let me
something
stop
like that.
this. Really? Okay. Stop. Okay. I stopped it.
Yeah, now it's good.
All right. Okay. So what I was thinking is going through some of these questions together, and see if you had any questions. They are representative of what you might expect for the upcoming exam later. I think Monday, I believe. Okay. All right. So anyway, any questions before we get started? No questions? Okay. Just a minute. It's hot in here. Okay, let's get started then.
Professor, one question quickly.
Yes.
Quiz 5, the correct answers still aren't released. I was wondering when those would be released.
Yeah, everything will be released today.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure.
Professor?
Yes.
Will the exam still be available for a couple days for us?
Yeah, it'll be like the first exam. It'll be available for about 3 days,
Okay. Thank you.
and I think you'll need about I don't know, 2 hours, maybe 2-3 hours. It'll be open book. Okay.
When you say the first exam, you mean the final?
The final exam. What did I say?
Yeah, the first exam. I was like, well, is there more like one the final?
No. The final exam.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. The first question. So this is the final exam will have a mixture of everything, although it might lean a little bit on the later side of the semester, right? But you can expect questions from the first half of the semester. Okay. So for instance, this one is from early on. The first half of the semester just asks you, if you know how to work with the date input field, right? And so this is asking you, which of the following options creates a form element whose initial date is January 1st, 1863? Okay. So basically it's asking you if you know that if you want to enter date, you would use the input field, right? Not the date. There's no such thing. Of type date. Okay. So these two are okay, input and type date. So those are both are good. And there is no attribute date. Okay, so definitely not these two. So it leaves these two options. And so basically it's asking you whether you know what the format of dates is, right? And even though the date input field in the browser will render the date based on the location where the browser is running, right? It'll format it so that it's appropriate for your particular locale and geographical region. Nevertheless, the value of the field is always this format, okay, where you have year, month, and then day, okay, not using this format. So definitely this is the correct answer. Okay. Then this one is asking you whether you understand how radio buttons work or checkboxes and whatnot. So this says, which of the following options implements a radio button that are mutually exclusive, right? So radio buttons by default, they're not mutually exclusive, right? Only if they know about each other would they know to be mutually exclusive. So radio buttons are meant for when you have several options, you want to choose one of the many options, right? But they can be grouped together, right? So that if you have several questions, right, they might be mutually exclusive between each other, but not necessarily amongst multiple groups. So the way you create groups is through the use of the keyword name, right? If two radio buttons have the same name, then they are in the same group, all right? So first it wants to make sure that you understand what field you use, right? And it's the input field, right? This input field, there's no such thing as a radio tag, right? So these both have type radio correctly, right? So it's between these two options, right? So the next part is kind of asking you whether you know that to make input fields mutually exclusive between each other, right? You don't use the ID, you use the name instead. Okay. Obviously, if you have IDs that are the same, right? These are the same. The whole point of using IDs is that these are different, right? They can't be the same, right? So definitely that should give you a hint that this is not an option. This is the correct option. Okay, and that is true if you have multiple radio buttons, right? So if you have a question and then you have two radio buttons, yes, no, right? And then you have another question and then yes, no, right? Another question, yes, no, right? You want these two to be mutually exclusive, but not necessarily across questions, right? So that if you click on this, then this gets unselected. If you click on this, this gets unselected. But they're not related to each other across groups. And the way you would do that is that each one would have its own name. So this would be maybe name 1, name 2, name 3, different names, right? So that they know that these are, if you give the same names to both to both radio buttons, then they are mutually exclusive between each other, between these two, right? But if they have different names between groups, then they're not mutually exclusive amongst themselves. Here's another question that goes back to what we did early in the semester that dealt with entity objects, right? That we wanted to create classes that were mapped to data models that were stored in a database, right? The format is a little bit weird, right? And I've moved away from this formatting because Canvas is not very good at embedding fields inside of text. So now instead, what I'll do is I'll have a placeholder, right, with a 1, 2, 3, right, and then you answer it separately. So let's see. So consider the following code snippet. So I imagine this was a class, right, that we wanted to map to a table, I believe. Let's see if there's any questions. Okay, here's there is, right? So fill in the blanks to create one-to-many relationship between A and B, right? So that means that both classes A and B presumably are entities, right? So let's see. So here's class A. So presumably this would need to be tagged as an entity, right? So this is an entity. So also B is the same thing, needs to be an entity, right? And then they have to refer to each other, right? They have to somehow refer to one another. Looks like this BS here looks like it's presumably on the one side, right? So presumably this is something like this. You have A and you have B, right? You have a one-to-many, right? And the way you implement it in a relational database is that you have a foreign key here that refers to a primary key like that, right? That's how you implement it in SQL, right? But in Java, the way you implement it, right, is that you have some kind of collection, right, of the other, right, on the one side, and on the many side you have just a reference to the one side, right? So that's usually how you implement it. So on the many side, right, you would have here, for instance, A presumably is what's referencing the class A. Okay, so this would be A. So A is now this here, right? And we are on the many side of a one-to-many relationship, right? So we are on the many side, many to one. Okay. Whereas on the other side, on the A side, right, on the strong side, on the one side, you are on the one-to-many side, right? And the map says that it's this variable is how we are referring to the A instance, right? So this is we're mapped by A, right? The A variable. Okay. And so and then we refer to all these B's, right, as a collection of instances of B, right? So this would be a list, right, of B. Okay. All right. What else do we have to do here? Let's see. Let's see what okay, it looks like this is the primary key, right? It looks like we're saying that this primary key is going to be generated automatically by the database. So we also need to annotate it as the primary key. We probably need to do the same thing. Okay, over here it's already done. Well, no, actually, no, we didn't, right? We have the generated primary key, right? So this is annotated as ID. Okay. What else? Let's see. It looks like we still have to fill these guys in, right? We have to fill these guys in. Let's see if there's any other hints. So class A maps to a table called AS, and B maps to a table called BS, right? And so that we do that with an annotation of table. We say that the table's name right, is AS, and the table name for the B class is the name, right, is BS. So this one is AS, right, and that's BS. Okay. All right, I think that's it. Answers are case insensitive. All right. Okay. Yeah. So this was a little bit hard to read, and so I've changed my formatting because Canvas really doesn't do a good job at embedding like input fields for you to fill in, and so it makes it really hard to read the source code. So I've opted to do like underscores with numbers, whatnot. So we'll probably do that. All right, so this assessment says, consider the following Java code snippet. And the question is, fill in the blank to implement a JPA repository for the following class. So this is the class. Presumably this has been correctly annotated as an entity, right? And presumably this is the primary key, right? And this is some field, whatever. Okay, so assume the class is properly annotated with JPA, implement the finder methods declared in the repository. So implement the finder methods. Okay. So, all right, so let's take a look at it. So this is the repository, presumably, right? So first we have to remember that this needs to be an interface, not a class, right? And that usually we don't implement it from scratch. Instead, we inherit from a repository that already implements a whole bunch of out of the box generic functions that allow us to CRUD the whatever class we want to CRUD. Okay, so the repository that we've been using so far is the CRUD repository, right? And it takes two arguments. It takes the class that we are CRUDing, right, and the data type of the primary key, which is integer. Okay, we don't have to do that. Then looks like the find all A's. That means that we want to return some kind of collection of all the A's, just like we did in class, right? And usually the way we implement it is by returning some primary key of the data type of whatever A is, right? And A is of type A, right? So this is a list of A, right? And the query, we annotate this, right, as an @query. And the SQL statement that we want here to retrieve all the instances of A, right, from the table A, right? And so we do something like, so there's two ways of doing it. I will accept either one. There's the more modern way of doing it, where you say, select just A, like that, right? This is the more modern way. Although you can use SQL, straight SQL, right? And instead you would do something like star, select star from A, right? So I'll choose, I'll accept either one, right? But the more proper one is just select the instance A of whatever it is that you declared here, this A over here. Okay, that's that. So the other query is that we want to select find A by ID. Notice that it's already returning the correct data type. Okay, and notice that we are passing an argument that is a variable Q that presumably is the value of the ID. Okay, and the query up here is that we want to create a query. We want to create a query, right, where we go do the selects like we did before. We did select. Again, I'll accept either select star or select A. And then from A, where, and now here's where you make the primary key equal to whatever parameter that you're passing here, right? So the primary key is called ID. So where, right, where A dot ID, right, is equal to some placeholder, right, because it needs to be a variable that you pass in, and this would be the name of the parameter. Now the parameter to the function is Q, right? But we are mapping it using the params. We're mapping it to a placeholder called W. So this is W. Okay. Oh, sorry, I put an equal here. So it would be, so you could write it, yeah, AID equal, right? Equal, and then colon ID. Oh, W, sorry. Colon W. Okay, this is where, right, we would expect for you to actually use punctuation W, a colon, right? Even though we might say, don't use punctuation. Here, you would be expected to actually put the colon in there, so that because you need to show that you understand that this is a placeholder, not a literal W. Okay. Although probably the question was designed to accept either W or colon W. All right, so let's see, question 5. So consider the code snippet. So it says, consider the code snippet below. What does H1 render when you click on the following buttons in the following order? Okay, so we click on W, and we click on X. Okay, so let's look at this. So let's see. All right, so looks like we have two buttons, right? W and X. And if we click on W, looks like we are calling LL with values 6 and 3. Or if we click on X, we call KK with values 9 and 2. Okay, well, let's see what happens. So if we click on W, we call on this LL right here, and we pass it 6 and 3. Okay, so who's LL? Looks like this is a Redux question, right? And it looks like the component is called AA, right? And here's AA, and we've been connected. So we've been connected so that this is what? This is the state to property mapper, right? And this is the dispatch to property mapper, right? So when we click on that, that means that LL has been injected into the component AA, and here it is, LL. See that? So what do we pass? 6 and 3. So this is 6, this is 6, and this is 3, right? And what are we going to be if we click on that? We're going to be invoking the dispatcher, which is this right here, the II. See that? And we're going to pass a type of PP, and we're going to pass the 6 and 3 right here. Okay, as properties S and TT. Okay, so if we go back to the, if we go to the reducer, presumably, where's the reducer? So it looks like this is the reducer, right? This is the state, right? And this is the action, and the type of the action is double P. So we go in here, right? And the type is double P. And we're going to return whatever you passed in S and T, which is, I think, 6 and 3. Right? We're going to add them up, right? And that's equal to 9, right? And so that's going to be the output of RR. So we're putting in the state, RR is equal to 9, right? Okay, that goes in the state. In the state, looks like this is the state. So this is this was the property. No, dispatch to property mapper, this one, right? Whereas this one is the state to property mapper. And this is the state, right? And we're extracting from the state the value 9, right? So MM is now 9. That means that we are injecting, right? This CC is right here, is injecting the property, right? The property MM with the value 9. So MM here in the component gets the value 9, right? And so that MM, this is 9. So it renders 9. So when we click on W, this becomes 9. So the answer is 9 here. Everybody follow that? You absolutely should expect a puzzle like this, right? Where you have something that what happens if you click here, there, and whatever, right? What does display? So here's another one. Well, what happens if you click on X? So this hopefully this will give us a chance to play around with this again, right? So we're gonna invoke double K with 9 and 2. So we're invoking double K with 9 and 2, which is this one right here, right? KK with 9 and 2. So this is 9 and this is 2, and we're calling double Q with 9 and 2. So double Q is over here with 9 and 2, right? So there's a minus here, so this is a 7, and that's going to be put in the state variable RR, right? So here RR is being injected into double M. So this double M here becomes what? 7, right? So it displays 7. All right. Okay, so this is 7. Everybody good? Okay.
Yes.
All right, so let's keep going. So we'll go to the next one. All right, so consider the following Java snippet. Looks like it's again a question on repositories. So fill in the blanks to implement a JPA repository, blah blah blah, for W, integer ID, yada yada yada. Okay, this looks very similar to the question earlier. I guess we can quickly fill this in, right? So this is an interface, right? And this is a CRUD repo, Citori, right? We're doing a query here, right? This is a select and W, and this is returning a list of W, right? And this is another query where we're doing a select W, where the ID, right, is equal to placeholder G, right? And this is at param. Okay.
Quick question there. In the select W front, you have big W and a small W. Why? Isn't the table like the big W? Why would you have a small one there?
Yeah,
Like,
so this is using the more modern syntax. There are two syntaxes that you can use with the query. You can use SQL, which is the older syntax, or you can use JPQL. So in SQL, you use straight low-level SQL. So it would be select.
Get all from table, blah, blah, where ID is.
Yeah,
blah, blah, blah.
from W, the table W, where blah, 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 right? The new JPQL is more object-oriented. So whereas this is the table W, which is probably the actual table's name is pluralized, right? WS probably. And whereas this is the variable W, from class W and little variable W, right? Where blah 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 blah. Okay, so this is the class W, whereas this is a table WS, right?
Okay.
So this is native SQL. You can use native SQL, or you can use the more modern object-oriented query language. That makes sense?
Okay, so like the little W in select W is an attribute
Yeah, so since
of the class?
Yeah, so since this is using WW, this is a hint that it's using the newer syntax, right? Where W is a class and this is a variable W of type W,
Okay.
right? In class, I'm sorry?
Oh, no, okay, okay.
Yeah, in class we covered I think we covered the older syntax.
Yeah, the native, yeah.
In the older syntax, you need to specify this is native. So you say, I think it's you say value equal right? And then at the end, comma, you have to say native true. Okay, because by default, if you don't say anything and you just provide just a string, it assumes that you're using the newer syntax. But because we didn't cover it, I'll accept either one.
Okay, thank you.
But I know many of you have explored the newer syntax. So I know that some of you will answer one way and some of you will answer the other. So I'll accept either one.
Okay.
Okay, so fill in the blanks, create a proper HTML. This is, just some boilerplate HTML. So the hint here is that this is the main content, right? This is the title, right? So that definitely is title, right? Title. And since that is title and you have a closing tag here, that means that this can only be header, right?
I think it's head.
Or head, sorry. Yep. Head. Right. And because this is head, then this can only be HTML. Okay. And because this is head, well, this can only be body. Right. And since you have a closing here, then this can only be body. And this can only be HTML. All right. Consider the following Node.js code snippet. Variable model below is a properly initialized mongoose model. So this is a model. Okay. And so it says fill in the blanks to modify the existing document to an existing document whose field Q is equal to W. All right. So we need to use this model, presumably to update. Okay. To update the document's field A so that its new value is S. Okay, so it looks like an existing document whose field Q is W. I want to modify the value A to S, right? So if you remember, the update takes two arguments. So it's update. And the first argument is a JSON object where you use the where clause. And the next one is the actual update. Right, and this update can be two types, right? One where you use the $ set to make changes, to change something, or you provide or you can replace replace the original object. You can do either one or the other. Here we're being asked to update the document's field, one field. We want to change its value to S. So definitely we have to go this way. Okay. So it looks like this is the first argument where we do the where. And it looks like this second here is where we do the update. Okay. So the where clause is based on that we're saying that Q is equal to W, right? So where Q, so Q colon W. Again, I've abandoned this this layout because it's so hard to read. And my new layout, I think from the quizzes you've seen that they're somewhat easier to read. Yeah, so that's the where. This is the where, right? And so the update, because we're changing, we're making a change. This is a $ set, and we are updating A. We're setting it to be S. So it's set colon. There's our colon, and we're changing the keyword A so that it's equal to S. Okay. Oh, it says quotations when absolutely necessary. So quotations are ignored if not necessary. Well, here, probably I declared this question to accept either quotation S or just plain all S. But I'm going to make an effort to accept the absolute minimum for you to have the answer correct, right? So S most likely would work without the quotations. Let's see, question 9. Consider the following Node.js code snippet. So it looks like we are using a mongoose, right? So presumably we are loading mongoose. So without even reading the question, right? I know that you mean to load mongoose there into a local variable. We don't really know what the variable that we're going to be using, but I'm assuming will be called mongoose. So it says fill in the blanks. So a new document WQ is inserted into collection A, right? So it looks like we need to start, presumably we need to start first by declaring the schema, right? I don't know if there's any, it looks like the model, let's see, const, let's see what do we have here? J dot model. So, okay, so J, that means that that's what we're calling the mongoose variable. So it's not mongoose. Okay, so I got it wrong here. All right, it looks like it needs to be called J, right? Because that's what we're using here, right? For this to work, the mongoose model needs to be called J. Okay, good. What else? Do we have any other? So this is also J here. Once we have that, let's see. This is being what? Assigned to a variable here, and whatever that variable is the schema, right? That is the schema. I don't know if we have any other. Oh yeah, see, the schema needs to be this. This needs to be D. See that, right? So it needs to be D here. Okay, so this is kind of a puzzle, right? That you have to read that these values can only be this based on how this is being used. Okay. What else we have here? Let's see. This seems to be Q colon W. Okay, fill in the blanks. So a new document QW is inserted. Okay, there's a new document, right? There it is. Right. So that seems to suggest that this is an insert or create. Sorry, in mongoose it's create, not insert. So that means that this must be the model f dot create. So when we declare, so here's where we declare the model. So this must be f over here. Okay, so f dot create. Okay. What else? Looks like here we're creating the schema. So the schema says that certain fields like Q, for instance, is a string. So it has to have a field Q, right? It needs to have a field Q that needs to be declared as a string. And I think they gave us a clue here that it needs to be inserted into a collection called A, right? So over here, we have to say that the collection, right, is A. Okay, so there it is, right? So we were able to fill in pretty much everything based on the rest of the code, right? So that the rest of the code is giving you some constraints, right? That we are using these explicit variable names so that it forces you to call other things a particular name. That makes sense? So, but yeah, you should have plenty of clues on how to fill everything else if you know, obviously, how mongoose and the models and the schema, how they work. Okay. All right, here's a couple other questions. So using mongoclient. So yeah, so this is mongoclient, meaning at the command line. We're going to be typing this at the command line. So this is using mongoclient. Modify a document. So modify a document in a collection called XYZ, where the field QWE is equal to. So okay, there must be some. We're going to be using some update where this gives us the where clause. We're going to modify a single field ASD. We're going to replace it. We're going to modify to SDF. So since this is the SDF over here, I bet this is the field ASD, right? We're changing it to SDF. And if we're modifying it, this must be set, right? Okay. Looks like this is the part of the where clause, right? There it is, where. So this must be QWE. So where QWE is equal to WER. So this must be update, right? This is the update. So this must be the collection. So the collection is called XYZ. So this must be XYZ. Okay. Using the Mongo client. Okay, so if this is the Mongo client, that means that this must be DB, right? DB dot, right? The collection update, right? And you're typing this at the command line to issue this command to Mongo. Okay. All right. Let's see. Here's another one. Using Mongo client, delete a document whose field DSA is equal to FDS from a collection called XYZ. Okay. Yeah. So we want to remove. So notice that this FDS is right here. So this is probably the where clause. Sorry. Delete has a where clause. That's all it has, a where clause. And here's our where clause. So where field DSA is equal to FSD, and this must be the command remove. So not delete. So remove. Okay. On a collection called XYZ. So this is also XYZ. That's the collection. And because this is from the command line, this is probably db.xyz remove a document whose DSA is equal to FSD. Okay. Okay, yet another question. Same thing with the Mongo client. We want to retrieve all documents in a collection called QWE, where field WER is equal to ERT. Okay. If you remember, if you're using the Mongo client, right? There's only one function to retrieve, find, right? And it takes two arguments, right? It has the where clause at the beginning, and it has the projections second, right? Projection. Okay. If you're using Mongoose, so Mongoose provides several, right? It provides three actually, right? It has the find, which is identical to the one from Mongo. So it has the where clause and it has the projection. But there's also two other ones. So find by ID. So find by ID only takes a string, right? Or an object ID. Okay. So this one returns an array. Always returns an array. Right? Even if it's one object, it'll return an array of one object. Whereas this one always returns an object, okay, or null, right? It doesn't return anything. Whose ID is the ID. The other one is find one, okay, which takes as argument the where clause, and this one also returns a single object. Okay, so this one uses an ID, and this uses a generic object that you can put the matching, right? So be careful, right? So if you're using the client, there's only one, but if you're using Mongoose, there's three versions. Okay. So this one's asking for the Mongo client. It says retrieve all, so find obviously all documents in a collection called QWE, right? So where the field WER is ERT. Okay, so here's WER is equal to ERT. Okay, perfect. So this is a argument to the find function on a collection called QWE. So this is QWE, and since this is the Mongo client, this must be DB. Okay. All right, here's another one. Here's perhaps a little bit that's a little bit more involved. It says using the Mongo client, retrieve all documents in collection QWE, where field WER is equal to ERT and field RTY is equal to TYU. So it looks like there's several predicates that need to be true, right? WER is equal to ERT and RTY is equal to TYU, right? So only display fields EW, EWQ, and REW in the results set. So careful, right? Only display these fields, okay? So let's see. So it looks like we have here an REW. and that's REW. We do want REW, don't we? Right, so that must be a 1 here. We have a 0 here, so this probably, see this W here, this curly bracket, that's probably the projection side, right, of our finder method, right, of our find method, where we're saying that we want the REW, we don't want something, okay? So definitely REW we want. We also want EWQ. So definitely I can't put EWQ here, right? Because this says I don't want it, right? So it can't be that. All right, so it must be that we have EWQ is equal to 1 here. So what is it that we don't want? Right? I mean, we didn't say explicitly that we don't want anything, but notice that it says, gives you a clue here saying only display these two. That means that you should know that the underscore ID fields is always returned, right? If you don't explicitly say that you don't want it in the projection clause, right? So that's where this 0 comes in. I'm going to say that we do not want the underscore field ID, underscore ID field. Okay. So yeah, so that's the projection clause over here. So what about this on the left hand side? What do we have here? Let's see. TYU and ERT. Okay, so it looks like let me clean this up a little. I can't see. Okay, so okay, so it looks like right. So the RTY is equal to TYU. So there's TYU. So this must be RTY. So RTY is equal to TYU, and something is equal to ERT. WER, right? So there's WER over here. WER. What else? Let's see. Okay. So notice that there's an and here. We want both things to happen, and so I'm gonna go with that. This is an and over here. So we're gonna say and this is true and this is true, right? That these two are true. Now the only problem with me putting an and there is that here we have a curly bracket, right? The and clause is actually takes a square bracket, okay, square bracket. So I'm pretty sure that was not a typo, right? I probably explained this during the exam, or I don't know if oh yeah, right here. So ignore any syntax errors. Okay, ignore any syntax errors. Yeah, and I probably explained this in the class, is that this was a limitation of the Canvas tool. Square brackets, when you are doing fill in the blanks, is a reserved character, right? So you see all these input fields. Those input fields are generated with these square brackets, right? So if you use your square brackets to display something, it'll get confused. So I use curly brackets there, right? So clearly I meant to put an and here with the square brackets here, right? So I must have explained that during the exam, or I'll probably explain it more in the question without giving away the question, right? So anyway, so the collection is called what? A collection called QWE. So there's QWE, right? So notice this db.qwe, and we are retrieving, so this must be a find. Okay. All right. Any questions there? Another question. Let's see. Using mongoclient, create the following new document in a collection called XYZ. And this is the new document we want to create. Okay. Again, the mongoclient, so this must be DB. The collection is XYZ. X, if I can type. We want to create, right? We want to insert, right? And the document is KWDE is equal to WER. Okay. And yeah, so there were many other questions which I have removed. Many of them were about Angular, which we have removed Angular from the course and expanded on many other topics. Any questions on that? Right. So here I have a couple other questions from another exam. Some of these questions are either the same or similar. So I'm going to skip over some of them, okay? Because we already covered them in the previous exam. So for instance, this one is the same HTML document question. So I'm going to skip over that one. Consider blah, 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 the following. So variable model below is properly initialized mongoose. Okay, so but whereas the questions that we saw earlier were very based on using the command line Mongo, right? This one is using the mongoose, the mongoose versions, right? So here's let's see. So variable model has been properly blah 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 initialized. Fill in the blanks to modify an existing document whose field Q is equal to W. Okay, so this must be model, right, dot update probably. Okay, and update has a where clause. So this is the where clause, and this is the actual update clause. Okay, so the where clause says that we want to modify a document whose Q is equal to W. So this must be Q, right, where Q is equal to W. And we want to modify a field A so that its value is S, right? So, okay, this is very similar to a question we saw previously, right? We want to do a set. We want to change A to be S. Okay, so that was very similar to before. Notice the new format, right? The new format is that instead of putting the input fields, embedded in the question, right, in the code, right, I'm putting it separate. That's because of a limitation in Canvas. Right, consider the following Node.js code snippet. Right. Okay, this is exactly the same question as we had before, but reformatted. Right. If it wasn't clear before, make shout and we can take a look at it. And I haven't seen if there's any questions on the chat. I don't know that I can see the chat while I am chat. Oh my goodness, there's been 21 questions on the chat. Hello, Professor. Blah blah blah. Mute the YouTube stream. Yeah, I tried that. Yes, we can hear. Hi, Professor. I was wondering when Q5 correct. Yeah, I'll work on Q5 unless explicitly stated. Should we assume that the questions are not in React? Because I know in React you can't edit value implicitly, but you can in native HTML. Oh no. So yeah, that's a good question. So from when it's a React specific question, right? It'll be clear that it's a React question, right? So if you don't see that it's a React question, then yes, you can assume that it's plain HTML. Do we have 3 days? Yes, you have 3 days to complete the final. Could you push the last lecture code? I thought I did, but I'll check again. Okay, that's it. Let's keep going. Let's see. We did that question already. Using Mongo, retrieve all documents, only display. I think we did this already. Yeah, it's the same questions as before, right? This was we were removing ID. We wanted root is 1, right? We also want EWQ. We want that. It's the same question as before, but formatted. Using mongoclient, create the following new document, XYZ. Yeah, same question as before. Using the mongoclient, delete a document whose field DSA. Yeah, it's the same question, but reformatted. Using the mongoclient, modify the document in the collection XYZ where the field is, change the field. Yeah, we did that. Using the mongoclient, retrieve all documents in the collection, blah, blah, blah. Same questions. Consider the following code running on a browser. Okay, let's see. So we're on a browser and we are fetching, right? We're fetching to localhost 1234 QWE. Okay, good. Then it comes back with ERT. We parse it, right, into JSON, and then we do a console log. Okay, all right. Okay, consider the following code running on the same desktop as the browser. So presumably this is a Node.js, right? That it's listening at port 1234, which is the same 1234, perfect. We require express, very good. And now we're listening to an incoming request right here, right? Which matches presumably this URL. Okay, so when we hit this URL, we are hitting this over here. Okay, and we are passing two path variables, right? EWQ and REW, which are the values are 2 and 3. And then we are doing a plus here. So EWQ is 2 and REW is 3. Notice that here we're using the dot notation. Excuse me. And here we're using the square bracket notation, right? Either one is fine. JavaScript can use these notations interchangeably, right? Because params is a map, right? So you could use either the dot notation or the square bracket notation, okay? And then we have this plus. Now this plus, okay, this plus you have to be careful, right? Because this here is a string, okay? So what we're sending back is actually 23, right? We could have parsed it as an integer, and this would have come back as a 5, right? Or it's actually 3 answers to this question, right? You can assume that it's coming back as a string 23 or the number 5, or okay, it could be an error code, right? Error code 23 or error code 5, because this is below 100, right? And all those are considered to be errors. Okay, but I will accept either one, any one of those 3 answers. Only use the lowercase, no quotation marks, fun, one word, blah, blah, use special characters, yada, yada, yada. Consider the following code. Okay. Using ignore. All right. Okay. So what does the browser console display right here? So yeah, so I would have accepted either 23 or 5 or some error code. Okay. All right, so complete the code snippet below when we HTTP post the following message. So we're posting HTTP localhost blah blah blah. EWQ sends a JSON object with attribute REW whose value is 3. Okay. Okay. So yeah. So we're being asked to create here something that will allow us to receive, or to send this code snippet, right? This localhost. So this would be something like fetch, right? HTTP, and this is localhost, right? To 1234, and to where EWQ. Let's see. Looks like this is the JSON object that we're sending. So this must be JSON stringify. Okay, and the object has an attribute REW that is equal to tre. So here's tre. So this must be REW. Okay. What else? Looks like here we are configuring something where in the headers. No, this is you must have done this 100 times this semester, right? This is application JSON, and this is the content type. Okay, and this is the headers. And then because we're sending a post, right? So this must be method post. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this one says complete the code snippet, blah blah blah. The server should respond with 3. Okay, so yeah, so now we've done the client side. We want to do the server side. So on the server side, Here's a require express. So this is the equivalent of app, right? We've used app, and we want to listen for what? For an incoming put. See that? We want to listen for an incoming put. So this would be, let's see, this would be a EWQ. We're listening for a put, right? And we want to respond to this URL pattern, right? It looks like there's a colon here. That means that this is a variable. That's a variable. So this must start with the hard-coded pattern of the EWQ, followed by some variable. We don't have a clue on what that variable might be. Okay. Let's see. Also notice that this is the function, the callback function, right? That responds, and this is the equivalent of REQ. Notice that I'm trying to confuse you, right? In that this is the request, and I give it the same name as a pattern here, as the for the URL pattern. Oops. Which is fine, right? Because this has nothing to do with this, right? They could totally be the same, right? Because this is a string. This is a string, whereas this is a variable. But it's playing the role of the request, and this is going to play the role of the response. But we don't know the name of this variable over here. Actually, we do right here. See that, the send. So we know that this is REW. So we're sending. What are we sending? Let's see. We're trying to retrieve a variable that is presumably in the params, right? So yeah, so the placeholder, the param variable is called REW. So this must be REW over here. Okay. And this must be the request, right? So the request is EWQ. EWQ, so this must be EWQ, and this must be params. Okay, and what else? Send, yada yada yada. So what's 8, 9, and 10? What's this? What's this over here? EWQ put. What did I have here? Require EWQ. I'm sorry.
Is it listen? LISTEN.
Ah, yes. Thank you. Very good. Very good. This would be EWQ listen to port 4321. 4321. I think this is a little bit too cryptic, so I will probably put the port here just to give you a hint that this is what I want you to write. Yeah, I think this is a little bit too cryptic, and you'd be guessing there. So yeah, so I'll probably put 43, but that's a great guess. Excellent, thank you. Let's see. Here's another example. Complete the code snippet below to respond to a put. This looks very, very similar to what we had before. Let's see. Reply with the JSON object embedded in the put message. Oh, okay. So reply with the JSON object embedded in the HTTP put message. Okay, so it looks like we're sending a body. We're sending an object, and we need to return that body content, right? So all right. So same thing, right? So this is the express instance. So we do REW, right? We're going to be listening to a put, and the URL looks like this, right? Tre and YTR. It looks like there's no path variables. There are no parameters. So this is a literal string. So this is TRE, and this is YTR. And these are the request response. So the response is FDS. Okay. So this must be FDS here, right? Because we're going to send, right? And looks like the the object that we're sending embedded in the request, that's what we're sending back, right? We're just echoing back the content, right? So this must be the request, right? So this is DSA, right? And you know, the content that was being sent embedded in the put message is typically embedded inside of the body, right, of the request. Okay, and as our colleague suggested, this is probably REW listen to port 5432. So 5432. Okay. Okay. Yeah, consider the following reducer. Consider the following reducer and component which have been properly configured and have no syntax error. So this is one of those, again, puzzles, right? Where, you know, we give you some cryptic reducer and you just have to follow the events as you interact with the user interface, right? And so this is presumably this is a reducer as they're telling us, right? And as any reducer, it has a function, right? Which the first argument to that function presumably is the state, right? So that's the state, and this is the initial value of the state, right? Apparently, it doesn't have an action, no action, so it doesn't have any action, and it looks like it's always returning the same thing. It's always returning the same thing. Probably that's why it doesn't have an action, right? We don't have like a switch case. That depending on the type of the action, you know, it'll do one thing or another. Instead, what is it doing? Let's see. It's let's see. It's returning an object with C, B, E. Okay, just those three attributes. C is going to have. So what's B? B seems to be the state, right? So. So looks like we're always copying from the state. We're always copying, looking at the state, right? And we're doing things with properties in the state. So C gets D, B gets E, and E gets its original value plus D. Okay, fine. Let's see. And we have initial values for C, for D, and E. Okay. Okay, so we sort of understand what the reducer is doing. Let's look at the component. So the component, here's the component, right? It's deconstructing I and J. Looks like I is just data, right? Whereas J looks like it's a function, right? Because we're doing an on-click. Okay. Then we have some connector, right? Which we have the two mappers, right? The first one is the state mapper. The second one is dispatch mapper, and this is the component F here, right? And these are the two, the state mapper and the dispatch mapper. Okay, so the dispatch mapper, right? Let's see, the state mapper is retrieving the value of I, right, and populating it with whatever the state, M is the state, right, and extracting the value of E and copying into I, and I is then being injected here. Okay, whereas the dispatch mapper, right, is here's the dispatch object function, right? It's listening for events that if anybody calls J, it's going to invoke the dispatcher with a type, with a bogus type, right? Because remember, the type is being ignored, right? We're ignoring the action completely. Okay, so the question is, what does the div whose ID is R, right here, this guy, what does that display after clicking the button Q? The button Q. So this guy, this button. Oh, 5 times. 5 times. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. So let's go for it. Let's see what's going on. So when this first runs, right? What is the value of I, right? When this first runs, what does it start? So, okay, so I is taken from E, and E is being provided from here, which is equal to the value of E and the value of D initially, no? So E is 1 at first, right? But we make it equal to E plus D. So 1 plus D is 1. So this is 1. So E is 2. And so to start off, right, this is 2. So I is 2. So this is 2, and this displays a 2 here. Okay, let me clean this up a little bit. Right? Now that we understand a little bit how it's working, right? The first time around, that's 0, right? So time 0, the value of I is 2. It starts with 2. Okay. All right, so here goes the first. So this is or let's call this the click. Okay, click. Well, we haven't clicked yet. Right? We haven't clicked yet. So at the first click, what happens? Let's see what happens. So can we erase a couple things here? Okay. So we click, right? When we click on J, what happens? Let's see. We click J right here. We invoke the dispatcher. The dispatcher runs. This is the state, right? But E starts off with now. E was initially 1, but then when the state calculated, E became 2. So this first click, now E has 2, right? So this is 2 in our first click, and D doesn't change. D looks like it's always going to be what? Actually, no, that's not true, right? Notice that we did change the value of D as well, right? What did D become? Well, whatever E used to be, a 1, right? So this used to be a 1, so D became a 1. And also C used to be 0, but it took the value of D, and D is 1, so C is 1. So this second time around, D is again 1. Okay. E was 2, so E becomes 3. But before we do that, right, D became whatever E used to be, so this becomes 2, right? And C becomes whatever D was, which was a 1. Okay. So it becomes 3. So that first click, this becomes 3, right? Okay. I guess we should keep track of all these guys, right? Okay, so we have that. We have 3, 2, 1. Right now we have that. Okay, so if we click again on click number 2. Click number 2. We go to J, right? We go to J. We go to O, and we invoke again, and we D becomes whatever E is. So this becomes 3. And sorry, no, let's just do that. So this is 2, right? So D is 2, so this becomes 2. This becomes 3, and this becomes 3 plus D, which used to be 2, so it becomes 5. Okay, so this becomes 5. All right, I don't know if you realize what's going on here, right? It's basically doing what? It's basically calculating the Fibonacci numbers, right? So this is always going to be the sum of the previous 2, right? So if you click again, this is going to be 8. If you click again, this becomes 13. If we click again, this becomes 21, and so on and so forth, right? So it's generating the Fibonacci numbers, right? Does that make sense? So after you click it 5 times, it's 21. That makes sense? Okay. Oh, I guess I ran out of things to say. Yeah, I think this should give you a good idea on what is it that we're expecting, right? So you're gonna see several puzzles like this, and only if you understand the flow. Okay, well, one thing to point out though, one of the things I like to point out is that these functions, right? These reducer functions, they get invoked at even when nothing happens, right? When it boots, when the whole thing is being set up, right? Even if you haven't, even if you have not called the dispatch function, the very first time, the reducers all get invoked. That's why it's so important to have a default. Okay, if you remember, we always say that when you do the switch in the case, right? You say, case 1, case 2, case 3, and I always say that you always have to make sure that you have a default clause, right? So that you're always outputting something that you want to output, right? So the reducer will generate an initial state, right? Even if you haven't clicked on anything, right? So that was crucial for this particular case, right? Because we needed to have E grab this initial value of 1. Otherwise you would have come up with some other, right? If you only would have assumed that this had no initial value, no initial state, and that you were only invoking it when you do a click, then you would have come up with a different value, right? But you have to consider that these reducers get invoked even before any dispatch event occurs, right? What Redux will do is it will invoke every single reducer, right? Especially if if you have reducers that are being combined, combined reducer, right? It will iterate over all the reducers and will invoke all of them, right? To initialize themselves and return some default state, okay? And even when you dispatch, right? When you dispatch, it will go through all the reducers, right? Every single reducer gets invoked, and each one will run their switch case statement, right, to see which matches. That's why that type, that action, that type needs to be unique, across all the reducers. Okay, you can't have a generic state types, right, which repeat across multiple reducers. Those have to be unique. Otherwise, it will just execute only the first case that finds, right, and then it won't continue. That makes sense? Anyway, that's all I had for you. Any questions? Anybody still with us? Okay, yes. No questions?
I actually have a question, but it's not regarding about the test. And somebody was asking actually about if we're gonna have class Monday and Wednesday next week.
No, today's the last class.
Okay.
Yep.
And my question is regarding actually like what classes do you teach like for fall semester, and are you located in Boston campus or?
Yeah, Boston campus. I teach this and databases courses and software engineering.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. If there are no questions, then thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure. I had a blast. I hope you did as well. You found it interesting and useful for your industry experience. I think that's what I tried to do is grab a lot of things that are actually happening in industry and best practices and inject them into the class, so that sometimes things that we do might seem arbitrary, but they're actually taken from experiences that I've had in my own practice. So I hope this helps you in your own career, and please stay in touch and let me know how it goes. Okay.
Thank you, Professor. It was
All right,
Thank you,
everyone. Thank you.
Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye bye.
Master.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye bye. Cheers.